This is the Shed End View podcast. So everyone, we're in the season 2, episode 2 of the Shed End View podcast. Last week we had Darren Mullins, so keeping with the coaching management theme, we've got a man I would describe as, not like us, as one of the unsung heroes at the club. Likes to keep himself in the background, doesn't heap too much praise on himself, but deserves all the credit he gets, and that's our first team coach or assistant manager. Which is it? Gary Boyle.
Gary Boyle is Luke.
Fair enough. You see, modest to the last. But it's great to have you on, Gary. Obviously, we're in the process of hopefully gearing up for a new season, whatever that may be. It's been a long way off, and we're coming into just past a year since we played our last league game away at Derryview. How's it been, I suppose, from yourself, personally and football wise over the last year, and we've only had a couple of games. How's it been, with all the sort of lockdown restrictions?
Yeah, well, obviously last year pre-lockdown wasn't a great start for me personally or for family life. So really, I've been away from football from probably last Christmas, if you take into account the tragic death of my son. So it's been really difficult, and the build up back to that was actually football is like a release. I found in the limited time that I did get back. I sort of came back in around March, and the game you're talking about there against Derby, I actually wasn't present at that one, but I had been to maybe I think one or two before that. And then getting back into the sort of training and what we thought would be a sort of normal season last August time, I found that football really helped and give us some sort of routine and that sort of to get over that difficult period. So added with everybody's individual sort of difficulties that lockdown is presenting, we obviously had a very difficult experience as well, and it certainly wasn't made very easy with all that in mind.
In terms of that, and we don't want to sort of dwell on it too much, but at the same time, how, from a personal perspective, I mean, it's something like it's a tragedy that you won't get over. You just by learning how to cope, I suppose, and nobody can understand what yourself and your family are going through because we're not in your shoes. But how has it sort of been from a personal perspective, in general, I suppose, over the last year or so?
Well, generally, I suppose we're very lucky to have two sets of really supportive family, and we're very close, like in terms of our living quarters and in terms of our relationships. You could throw a blanket from my house to John and Ryan's, and our parents live in between that, So from that regard, nobody's been lacking for support and that sort of thing. But from I suppose Kelly's point of view, she's a hairdresser as well, so she literally has worked maybe 3 weeks in the past year, and when I was sort of getting back to work, it was always a worry that she was in the house by herself with nothing to occupy her mind, and that still in some regard is the case. As I say, we spoke to quite a few people that have gone through similar experiences, and it is learning to live with it. Time, as they do say, at that time you don't see any way through, but time is a healer, and although it doesn't get any easier, you certainly can adjust and learn to cope. And I definitely do think that routine, and in terms of the football and that release from real life, as I called it, was really beneficial for me at that time, and it's just a pity that we couldn't get going to really sort of establish that back,
Yeah, so Gary, you've been at the club for a few years now, and you jumped from a sinking ship from Armagh the night that we relegated them and got promoted, and we saw you up around the showgrounds then. But the thing that I found interesting is that obviously the coaching staff up to that point for the 4 years had been the guys who had rebuilt the club and had been the same 4 coaches. What was it like coming into that dynamic where they kind of seen the club from the ground up, and you're coming in? How do you impose your style and your ideas on quite a tight-knit group?
Well, I suppose from my own point of view, I started coaching just literally before that. It was sort of the January before that relegation promotion playoff with Armagh. Armagh obviously had played for them previously, and Marty Rice sort of gave me a bit of a chance. There was an opening there, and sort of I never really thought about it prior to that. What happened with the end of Armagh was essentially we done a reversal whereby Newry, who were by far and away the better team, went up a division and Armagh went down. Subsequently to that, then Marty, Rice and Armagh parted ways. So the opportunity arose. It was something I jumped at. As I say, the guys had done superbly well to build the club back up, and I sort of came in a learning environment, and that was my quota to start off with. Probably through John, and I had no real relationship with Darren or the boys at that time. Going into that situation obviously was quite daunting. I played with a lot of the guys. I was fairly green in terms of any sort of coaching, and just sort of had to learn on the go. The guys were brilliant. Going into an environment there whereby Darren was heading it up, and then you had Burmsy and the respect that he sort of obviously obtained through his illustrious playing career. Jervis as well talks very straight talking, knows football inside out, and then you've Mickey Keenan, who is still, I think, on the playing books at Newry. Right, I think he's maybe into his 30s now, is he?
I think he's still in his 20s. Like
we trained for I think 23 weeks there, and I think Mickey missed 2 sessions. So it just shows the love of the game that he has. Subsequently to joining that bunch, I don't know whether it was me, but Darren's the last man standing, and the coaching setup has sort of completely changed. I didn't think I smelled that badly, but
in terms of that, I mean, would generally sort of like to get questions in from sort of listeners or listeners, viewers, but you know, sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't. But we've got one that sort of is pertinent, just what you were talking about there. Sort of when Darren announced obviously a few weeks ago that he's signing a new 2-year contract, after sort of a wee bit of fuss and debate about whether he's going to stay on. From your perspective, how disappointed were you that he decided to stay on? And that question comes from Darren Mullen himself.
Well, if he had left, we all would have had to leave. Isn't that what you sort of you come as a team and you leave as a team? Isn't that the way it sort of works?
Yeah, but then you've just sort of discussed about how you sort of come in afterwards. You know what I mean? I thought you were going to shoe in for the role. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of it all serious, just to clarify, Darren didn't actually ask that question. I just made that up. But from your perspective, I mean, obviously, as you said, you didn't really have a relationship per se with Darren whenever you came in. You didn't know him, but obviously that's grown over the last sort of 4 years or so. Yeah. How important I suppose it was for the club and for I suppose for the coaching staff and for you personally that sort of Darren stayed on. You had that continuity going into hopefully next season.
Well, I suppose Darren, along with a very small band of merry men, is the club and is Newry. What he's done for the club sort of speaks volumes of the man, and you know, he's taken the club from obscurity to the Premier League, and that's no mean feat. And again, not to be speaking out of turn on a shoestring budget, with predominantly local lads or with a radius of 20 miles, you know, diameter. It's no mean feat. Darren is a manager that everybody wants to play for. He's a manager that coaches want to work for. And to me, that is probably the most important thing. The continuity with the players and with the club itself. I think it is very important. Darren obviously has obtained personal accolades in terms of his coaching qualifications. So it's no surprise with what he's done, and with backing that up with the qualifications that possibly he has been sought after, and maybe there was options available to him, and it's subsequent to his success. And I do think that the players are happy that he's decided to stay on. Obviously, the ultimate goal
most of them.
Well, anyone that's not will probably be moved on. No, on a serious note, for the club itself, Darren's obviously signed a 2-year deal with the intention of getting back up to the Premiership. As we spoke about, it'll probably be a transitional period as well, whereby we're going to have to sort of try to bring down the average age at some point. But the ultimate goal is to get to the Premier League. Whether that means then to build on that again, then that's what we'll have to cross that bridge if and when we have to come to it. But I would certainly say that for our older players, with Darren staying on, it's made their decision to give it another rattle a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that's definitely interesting, because last season, and we talked about this with Darren a couple of weeks ago, was it looked like in that gap when football had opened up again, Darren and yourself built a very strong squad, and from the looks of it, it was like, okay, we fancy your chances this season. And the fact that nothing happened, the pressure and the expectation of coming into Newry, and fans almost now expecting that we're pushing for promotion and for the league title. Like, how do you manage that over the past 2 or 3 years and get used to those expectations? And I suppose keep each coaching session simple for the players, but what the overall goal is.
Coaching sessions have to be simple for the players, because there's not a lot of sharp brains, is there? Like,
sorry. See, to be honest, with me, and again, I'm obviously gaining experience and learning all the time, but for me, coaching, it's slightly overrated in the regard that you could be the best coach in the world, but if you don't have the players to go out and deliver, it doesn't matter what you're putting on Tuesday, Thursday, and trying to implement on a Saturday. And for me, I'm not just talking about the ability of the players, it's the characteristics and the personality of the players, and for that they have to take a lot of credit, really. We're very lucky that in a lot of training sessions and a lot of games we have an experienced crew there that can nearly lead from the front, and that's really a reflection of Darren as a manager and us as a coaching team, that you can sort of go out there and trust your players to take your message and deliver on, and if somebody's not doing it, then maybe they can sort that internally. At this season, our goal was to be promoted. We were flying at different points in training. It was sort of like a very up and down, whereby we were getting the players ready to start. I think we had 4 provisional start dates, so we were sort of ramping up the effort levels, the intensity levels. You could see that the players were getting a real buzz back, thinking, it's one thing training and even to a certain degree playing friendly matches, but the competitive edge then sort of comes back, I think, just before you're about to embark on your competitive season. And there was maybe a couple of times where Seth and Darren and the other coaches were looking back going, yeah, we're ready here. And then there was an awful sense of deflation on occasion, and it was really, really difficult for the players and for us as coaches not to show your own frustration, and yet try to ensure that the training session was worthwhile and was beneficial. Again, it's hard to know. We played a couple of competitive games. The last competitive game we didn't play well. That's not to say that we weren't in the right spot or we weren't ready to embark on a title winning campaign. It just didn't go well, and that sort of the time again. Looking back, it was just a one-off. I think it's not a perception or whatever of where we were as a team or as a squad.
In terms of just, one of the things you talked about there was the previous answer about bringing down the sort of average age of the squad, and obviously we have a few sort of elder statesmen, I suppose is the best way of putting it, and but we sort of have a mix. We sort of don't really have sort of anybody in between. You've got the likes of John McGovern and guys coming through there at a young age, and then you've got your Hughesy and your John and things like that. Just before we obviously started to record, Darren had mentioned, and it'll be announced obviously by the time everybody's listening to this, that we've made our first signing of the. Well, I was going to say pre-season because we're sitting in the middle of March, but I suppose, and you don't want to say pre-season either because we don't know when we're going to actually be starting. But I suppose it's a unique, Darren touched on it a couple of weeks ago, it's a unique sort of circumstance where you might be able to get a bit of business done sort of earlier rather than later, and, maybe a chance to sort of bring boys in once you can train again. But to that end, Philip Donnelly is set to sign, or by this stage has hopefully signed. Obviously a player you played with at Armagh. A player that's been at Newry before as well, and has been at Warren Point, and was excellent everywhere he's been. One of the things Darren did say, that Anna match that you touched on there, probably we did a lot of things right, but we just didn't have anybody to sort of break the lines from midfield. And I know that's a sort of oft-used saying, we need somebody to break the lines, but when you have somebody with that wee bit of craft that can play in between the midfield and the striker, the way sort of Philly can, he's going to be, and he's of that age as well. He's sort of, mid-20s, mid to late 20s. How important a signing, if he plays this potential, could Philly be, given somebody has played with him in the past?
Yeah, no, listen, Philly Donnelly's a terrific signing. He's a friend. He's a previous teammate. He's a guy that we've tried to sign since I've been at the club. I've described him to anybody that doesn't know, and to maybe listeners that don't know too much about him. He's as close to Rambo in terms of his playing style as I've seen in that number 10. And as you talk about getting in between the lines, he's clever, he's aggressive, he plays with intensity, and he scores goals, which we found out to our detriment for Warren Point. I think he scored in a cup game and in the league with last gasp equalisers and winners against us. So no, Philly's a Premier League player who hopefully will do really, really well for the club. He's a player, again, with that ability, but with the characteristics I think that you need in terms of integrating to the squad. He's played with quite a few of the boys before, and he's been at the club before, so hopefully Philly can hit the ground running.
Is it sort of that statement of intent, I suppose, per se, in terms of, there's times in the past where we've maybe brought in sort of quantity, and that's not to say it's been quantity over quality, but we brought in maybe 4, 5, 6 players, and that's been needed maybe at the time. Is it maybe a case of bringing in, yes, maybe 2, 3 players? Obviously, we don't know, but that of a certain quality. The quality level is there. Where it's going to improve your starting 11. You're always looking to do that. Doesn't always happen, but Philly has proven quality at the top flight.
Yeah, well, that's it. Philly is a starting 11 player, but at Newry now we probably have 13, 14, 15 that all believe that they're in the starting 11, and that's really good. In terms of squad, at this level, there's no point in carrying people. If you have a sort of tighter knit squad, and obviously we have a lot of younger players coming through that have shown great glimpses of ability, that we can maybe dip into that pot as well. I think we're starting to get a real good mix of sort of experience on youth, and instead of bringing players in to stockpile them, that'll maybe have a negative effect, I think, anyway. If you have too many players that all believe they should be in the starting 11, it can lead to maybe negative influences around the squad. Obviously it's not easy not playing. Went through periods of that myself, but you have to see the bigger picture, and when you're called upon, deliver.
Yeah, I suppose it's interesting that you have to, manage all these different personalities in a football team. But what's it like, Gary, coaching your older brother John, who I'd say could be tough enough at times that on the training pitch from what I've heard?
No, listen, coaching John's no problem at all. It was far worse when the two of us were playing together. at one point it would have been a whole pile worse. And worse when the three of us get together on a Gaelic pitch too, but that's for another day. No, listen, it's completely down to John. John's made this transition very easy for me. We have a very open and honest relationship, probably predating even John and I. It probably came from Dad, and Dad would have always give us honest and open feedback after our own performances, and John and I have carried that through, and we maintain that relationship going forward. Again, if something he doesn't agree with that maybe I suggest or I put on, he'll not destroy the session or try to embarrass you in front of the group, but he'll maybe subtly tell you, don't do that again. John's his own worst critic as well in terms of football. If he does something wrong, there's no need for me to tell him about it, although I will. Listen, no, John's made the transition very, very easy. I've played with a lot of these players. The players have made it very easy, and I'm going in there, and whilst I have confidence in my ability to deliver, these guys have played at a higher standard than I have, which is possibly a regret in my career too. But having given them the time, and football is a very unforgiving industry, whereby you'll only get one or two chances with some people, and if you don't sort of deliver either as a player or as a coach, you'll not get too many more chances.
In terms of just you touched on there, obviously for those that don't know, but obviously John's part of our team at Newry. Then you go to St. Peter's Warrenpoint, and you're obviously a coach there. And Gaelic, John plays. Ryan was the captain last year, and is obviously one of the better players there as well. Not to do any of the rest of them any disservice. But I mean, you're coaching at a very high level in that regard with Warrenpoint, and being so close to winning down senior championship over the last couple of years. How is it easier coaching without? I mean, if you suppose you haven't had the experience of coaching a team that doesn't involve either John or Ryan, that'd be fair. That'd be all right.
Well, at Armagh, I obviously had no family connections, and I was starting out, so to speak. I've done a wee bit now with younger setups and younger age groups as well, where the boys wouldn't be involved. But you'd be right in saying that the majority of my coaching would be with family involved.
Yeah. And I mean, how this sort of transferable skills. I mean, obviously there's two different games. There's similarities in the two codes, but I mean, transferable skills. I mean, does it sort of benefit you coaching Warrenpoint and Gaelic when you're coming back in Newry, and vice versa? I mean, do you see things that you can take from each session or take from each team, or something that you see that you can bring into the opposite sort of training session?
Yeah, I think the sports are becoming more and more similar, and by way of sessions, the sort of overwhelming thing is that they're all similar in terms of structure and what you're trying to generate out of them. For me, at the minute, it's probably taken away things from how managers or other coaches deal with situations, or their maybe subtle ploys within sessions, or drills or small-sided games that they're trying to get at, and trying to sort of build a portfolio for myself to dip into in terms of how they handle situations and manage things, and what different tweaks they put on mundane small-sided games in both codes.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it just from your perspective, I'm moving sort of not away from the coaching stuff, but looking at the sort of, hopefully, as I say, next season that will, whenever that may be, and that's what we're all looking forward to. As we touched on earlier on, we've been away for a year, and you've been away sort of even longer than that. I mean, genuinely, if you had the current squad that we have now, Philip Donnelly coming in, no other sort of add-ons, is there a realistic sort of approach where we can pick up sort of from the positives, of the false starts that we had last year, where boys were going well in training, where pre-season, all 64 of them, we were sort of looking decent. Are there positives you can take from those to feed into an actual proper pre-season with an actual start date where we get that to play actual football?
Okay, I believe so. Last season was, I suppose, it was very much trial and error for after we were classed as non-elite, so to speak. This season, I think we will be able to put sort of firm dates in place with the optimistic outlook with the rollout of the vaccine and different things. It'll give people peace of mind, if nothing else. And I do think that we will be able to have some sort of normal pre-season into season, which hopefully won't be interrupted with another COVID sort of outbreak.
Yeah, and from a personal perspective, and not to sort of try and push you in one way or the other. I mean, looking up, if you touched on, you have your A license now, is that right?
No, I have my B license. I'm looking to do my A license in the summer, and again, COVID related. Hopefully, that'll be something that I can start to progress with.
So I mean, you've looked at going from sort of the novelty, I suppose, of starting off with Armagh in 2016, to coming to where you are now. I mean, there's been progression. It's obviously something that you're enthusiastic about and want to get those qualifications. Looking at, do you see yourself in a managerial role, be that at Newry, be that somewhere else, in the future? Is that something ultimately you would want to be looking towards?
Listen, I'm ambitious as a person, and it certainly is something that I would be looking towards, and it is in the back of my mind. Currently, no. Currently, I'm very happy to, as I say, hopefully get on the A license course this summer and progress that way. Keep learning of everybody that I come into contact with, and taking wee bits from everybody. There's a big difference between manager and coach, and I think that sort of needs to be realised as well. And obviously I do pride myself on doing a lot in terms of trying to be as professional as possible with the coaching end of it, but to take on a management role certainly jumps up a notch. Maybe not in terms of the on-field stuff, but certainly the off-field stuff and dealing with players and personalities and all that comes with all that.
And just last, with another question in from listener / viewer, and it's another Darren Mullen related question, funnily enough, asking, is he the best manager that you've / played, coached under?
He has to be up there for success. Managers come and go. I think Darren's man management, I suppose, and his relationship that he's built with players is certainly a big thing that I would take into my own coaching role and going forward like that. Everybody's played under managers that have success that they didn't get on with, but certainly Darren has backed up his success with the relationships he has with the players, and I don't really think any of the players would say anything negative in terms of that, which is always a good sign.
So that question came from Darren Mullen as well.
So Gary, hopefully we can get back to it soon enough. And I suppose just for all the fans watching and that, what is the aim for the season of 21-22? And where would you like to see us kind of get to?
The aim is well, there's no point in saying that we're going to take it one game at a time. The aim for a club like Newry, the aim has to be promotion. With the squad that we have currently, we've added Philly. If we add a couple more, very well. The guys are the squad that we have is a Premier League squad. We said it last year, and as we've alluded to, some of the guys are coming to the twilight possibly of their careers, so they'll be itching to get back at it, itching for success, because football's over in a blink of an eye, and I know the likes of Noel and John and not think that, but if you talk to John or Engine or Hughes or Tucker or any of them boys, I know that they would say, you know, to really go for it when you have the opportunity.
Gary, it's been brilliant. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Your knowledge has been a real insight, and it's been very interesting to hear. And who'd have thought that, you know, whenever you gave up your Sterling golf career at Warren Point because you saw me, you saw how good I was a couple of years ago, that, you know, they would come to this and I'd be interviewing you for I think you made the right choice, to be fair. But look, I really appreciate you coming on and speaking so honestly and candidly about everything. And listen, fingers crossed that we'll be seeing you back in the sideline very soon, and there'll be supporters in to sort of hopefully see us back up the Premiership in the not too distant future.
That's it. Thanks a million, lads.
Cheers. No, thank you. Cheers.